And thanks, Minister. And the Labour Party want to support this bill because what is at the heart of this bill is addressing an issue which I think should have made everybody in Ireland feel extremely uncomfortable, that somebody who is a multimillionaire tax exile, who owns a number of radio stations, who doesn't like what certain journalists are writing about him, decides to ban entire publications and representatives who work for those publications to speak on the radio show or the radio station that he owns. This even extended to the sports programmes. So what was at the heart of this here was an attack on journalism, an attack on free speech, an attack on democracy. Because there are a lot of things, as has been said, that we've taken for granted over the last maybe periods of our own lifetimes. The way that democracy works, the way that people carry themselves in the public forum, the way that the judiciary works, and the way that journalism seeks the truth. But we've seen what's happened in the United States, that the media have been portrayed as being the enemy of the people. In this country, we've had 2 journalists murdered over the last 25 years. And journalism is something that is the heart of a democracy because they do seek the truth. Now, we all in political circles will have complaints about individual publications, sometimes individual journalists, and we feel sometimes we're being unfairly criticised. But it is central to our belief system as in a republic that journalism is allowed to do what journalism is supposed to do. So for a radio station that gets its licence effectively from this Oireachtas to ban a number of publications from appearing on any programme on that station is an outrage. And the Oireachtas has to react. And that's why the Labour Party are in full support of this bill. Now, Minister, you've outlined a number of issues with the bill, and it's important that yourself and your department will look at any piece of legislation, and if it's going to seriously be enacted, it has to be workable, and I accept that. But I also accept the point that has been made by Deputy Cullinan. 18 months, we've been on the receiving end of this as well, from bills that we've brought forward. And it almost feels like an attempt from government that we can't be seen to vote this down, so we'll elongate the process. Hopefully it'll almost go away. And, I am almost 12 months away from a piece of legislation I brought forward that I was told will come back to in 12 months' time. It doesn't feel as if it has the level of urgency that is needed because it's already been within these chambers for the last 2 years. What is to stop another tax exile or the same tax exile to acquire another radio station that currently has licence from the state and to issue another ban on whatever publication he feels shouldn't be allowed to give their point of view? It could happen tomorrow, and yet we have said it'll take 18 months for something to be done about it. I want to make another point, and this is the responsibility that all of us in political life have, because I have noticed in the last number of years, and certainly since the dawn of the social media age, that there has been, from certain political quarters or maybe supporters of certain political entities or movements, personalised attacks on journalists. They've been trolled, they've been abused, often it's quite misogynistic. There are attempts made to assume that somebody because they write for a certain publication or because they're from a certain part of the country or because they are related to somebody who may be involved in politics, that they have a certain point of view. And I think all of us in politics, regardless of our political party, have a responsibility to call that out. Because it's absolutely wrong that somebody engaging in journalism, in producing copy, in trying to seek the truth, in giving what they believe to be a fair analysis of what's happening in these chambers, will be targeted by the supporters of any political entity here, government, opposition or anybody, and to accuse them of being political or having a political slant or biased or whatever. Because just as we want to encourage people to come into politics And we speak regularly in these chambers about, the type of poisonous culture that you have to deal with when you're in politics sometimes. We also want to encourage people to come into journalism and to seek that essential truth, and to encourage that life, that career. And it's going to be very difficult for somebody to want to be attracted to journalism if, by virtue of where you're from, or because you come from a certain part of the country, or because there's a member of your family who may have been politically aligned at one point or other, or assumptions can be made about you, that you will be on the receiving end of vicious abuse. And we've all seen it, and we can't pretend it doesn't happen. And I think all of us have responsibilities in terms of whatever supporters we may have for our political entities online to behave in a much more responsible fashion. Because I've seen some quite poisonous, attempts made to silence online in the social media space, so that a journalist whose job it is to analyse, whose job it is to report, I think the agenda is often to hope that they will second-guess a comment, second-guess a column, second-guess a question that they may ask of a political leader. And I think that is wrong. I think that is wrong, and we need to be very mindful of that. So, Minister, in my comments, just to be clear about what the Labour Party are saying, it is an attack on democracy for somebody who has deep pockets to own a radio station and to limit those who can come on purely because of the profession that they hold or the publication that they write for. That's attack on democracy. And government and the Oireachtas have to respond to that attack. And it's not good enough to say we can respond effectively in 18 months because circumstances have changed and this ban is no longer in place. That is not good enough. I would remind people that we live in a country where 2 journalists have been murdered over the last 25 years, and that the vitriol and the poison that is thrown in the direction of certain journalists is something that has to be called out, and I think is making some people wonder why they're in the profession, and certainly is making some people second guess as to whether they will go in to the profession. And the last thing I'll say is just in support of what Deputy Cullinane has said about this delaying tactic. Politics works best on here, often on evenings like this, which doesn't get much media coverage, where people don't necessarily are watching in great numbers, when government and opposition can constructively work together. But it does take, I suppose, a little bit of the energy out of constructive politics when you bring a piece of legislation forward in good faith, and government, rather than voting it down, but rather than just letting it move to committee stage and then having a thorough investigation in it, kicks it down for 12 months or 18 months, and then really the energy behind the bill and the intent behind the bill and the ethic behind the bill is lost. And then, Minister, I mean, you're just going to have to hope that, whatever multimillionaire person stays out of the communication sphere and doesn't put down another ban on the Irish Times or whoever else. And that would be a situation, I think, that you would regret. So with those comments, we do support the bill, and we look forward, if it does take to 18 months, to seeing it enacted.